So to continue on where we left off last time, so we were talking about a lot of different cases involving walls and where the tchum exists or doesn't exist, above 10, below 10. That was the primary primary discussion. And then we're trying to figure out what the status is if somebody has been pushed out of the Eruv, and the question is, how are they allowed to return? So normally we said the short answer is that you can't. Once you're out, you only get Daled Amo and you're stuck. Then we were introduced to two interesting ways to solve this issue. One of the ways was that if you're actually not beyond 2 amot from the tchum, you can actually re-enter, because whenever you go outside of it, whenever you leave the tchum, you're allowed to have your Daled Amo. If your Daled Amo happened to overlap into the tchum, that would also allow you to go back in. The other one we have is the advice of the people of the Chaim of Mechosa, who said, since we let you move out of your Daled Amo to go to the bathroom, so what you should do is just wait to go to the bathroom, and then you can just make sure you go to the bathroom while you're inside the tchum, and then that way you will have solved the issue, because once you're inside the tchum, by a permitted way, then you're allowed to continue on within the tchum. So that'll be a way that you could solve the issue as well. So so the case that we're immediately discussing on the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Bet and Mem Gimel Amud Aleph, we've got the case where Nechemia had gone outside, and the question is, are you allowed to make an Eruv, make a wall of people to allow him to come back inside? So we said this all relates back to the argument we had in our Mishnah about if somebody is taken out by non-Jews and placed into a pen or a stable against their will by non-Jews, that the walls that are then created, do they work or not? So we were concluding that it seemingly does work. So then the question then is at the end, if that works, then the question is, so therefore the case when Nechemia had actually walked outside because he was too engrossed in thought, so you would be able to build a human wall. So then the question is, so okay, if you build a human wall, so will this help or not? So it also comes down to, are we allowed to right? So that'd be for the law of Gamliel, then the human wall will certainly work. So, but Odilma, again, we're on the Mem Dalet Amud Aleph 6 verse in. So Odilma B'Delo Malo Gavriaskina. Maybe they weren't talking the case where about the question of the deaf people, rather the question, or if they could fill it in. The question was, the question was, is halach like Rabbi Eliezer or not like Rabbi Eliezer in regards to when you redraw your Daled Amo, once you leave the tchum, how do you draw it? Right? Do you draw it with you at the center, and therefore if you're within 2, you're good, or not? So that's the question. So Pita, so the case is, are we talking about where you're filling it in with people, or are we talking about the case of Rabbi Eliezer? So Pshita Bidelo Malo Gavriaskin. Clearly, it's not talking about a case where you can fill the whole area with people. Or if you said you're allowed to do the human wall trick and fill it with people, what would be the problem? Because you built a wall of people, and he's allowed to come in. So what's the issue? So Hamarav Halach Rabbi Gamliel B'dir V'Sohor V'Sfina. And did it say like Rabbi Gamliel in regards to the pen in the stable and boat? Rather, it must be a case where the distance was too far to make to the human wall. Rabbi Eliezer and the issue is about Rabbi Eliezer. So the question is, so now we're going to try to figure out what religious opinion actually is and how does it work. So so what was Rav Nachman's statement to Rav Chisda? He said, Yikanes, let him go in. Ma Yikanes, la b'lo mechitza. If he says you can simply go in, does it not mean that you can go in without the use of a mechitza? So that would seemingly be the case then, that all you need is that mechitza, and then we're good. Right? You don't even need mechitza. He says enter. He didn't say enter by means of using the human wall. He said enter. So that would mean we felt he'll take Rabbi Eliezer then. So Yitvei Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rava. So then Rav Yitzchak is questioning whether or not we're allowed to make this human wall trick or not. So here's the case. Nafla dofna lo yamid ba'adam behema v'kelim. If a wall fall down on Shabbos, you shouldn't put a person, animal, or utensils there to block off the space. Lo yuskov tamita the frost less adin. Similarly, you shouldn't upright a bed in order to spread a sheet over it. The fish she'ein osin ohel hara b'tchila b'yom tov ve'ein tzarich l'or Shabbat. And you also can't upturn a bed and to put a canopy over it. Think canopy bed here. Did I cut out there or still clear? Okay. Okay, so still good because nobody doesn't say anything. Okay.
Yeah, we can still hear you. No,
okay.
we're good.
Okay, it's making sure. So
Couldn't find my
all right. Okay. So we're talking about the canopy beds and making a temporary tent. So therefore, you're not allowed to make it on, and because making a tent is usher to do on Shabbat and Yom Tov. So therefore, you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to do this. So therefore, you can't. So we're comparing the case of fixing a wall that fell down by placing something in the way of it to the case of where you put up a temporary tent, which is problematic. So this also runs into an issue of are you allowed to, let's say, kids like making forts. So the question is, so kids are allowed to do so, but are parents? And the answer is that, well, no. That parents should be making those nice, the forts, the blankets and chairs and things. So kids do it. It's not necessarily problematic, but it's generally frowned upon for and most likely forbidden for adults to do so. Again, for a particular question, please consult Rabbi Karapkin if this becomes relevant. But one primary thing that'll come out of this is, let's say if people now have their outdoor tents, whether it be for sukkahs or it be in terms of because you're having a backyard minyan, so you should make sure that your tent is up beforehand, not that you start spreading it out over the over the frame on Shabbos. But if you have, let's say, a retractable awning, though, so there is so with potential kula, assuming that you have at least a tefach covered, then you can. Then that's considered to be there's already a partial awning, and then you can extend the rest of the way. So therefore, let's say if you had let's say if you wanted to cover so you wanted to have it open, you want to have your sukkah or your tent more open, then let's say you had it rolled back mostly but not the full way, then you could be able to finish and roll it back the rest of the way even on Shabbos or Yom Tov. Okay.
So, Rabbi, is there any leniency to get a goy to do that for you, like we talk about with respect to heat and things like that inside of shul?
I'm not certain.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'll try to find that out. If the Isser is Durbanan, normally we would allow it. If it's, I'm not certain.
Okay, I don't want to slow you down. That's fine.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
I also have to go wake up my son. I'll be back in a minute.
Okay. So Amar Le. At Amar Li Meha, Vana Domer Le Meha. You said that you can't make even wall. We said you can. Because we said, Osa Adam et Chavero Dofen Kadesh Yochal Vishta Vishan. So you say a person may position his fellow as a wall so that he may eat, drink, or sleep in the sukkah. So you're saying that you're not allowed to make a wall. You just proved from this other case. But I'm going to prove a case where you can. Because in the case, let's say, if a person, let's say you're missing a wall of your sukkah, and the final wall only needs to be three. Like the third wall only needs to be three tvachim, which is pretty small. So you could have most people are broader than that. So you simply have your friend stand there at the third wall, and there you go. Now you got to kosher sukkah. And so even though normally it wouldn't have been, because you stood there, now it's kosher. And similarly, you'd be able to, if let's say somebody passed away outdoors, and you don't want to leave the body in the sun, so you could bring a bed out and then spread a covering over the bedposts in order so that the person so that the dead body will not be in the sun. Also, you can also do similar things to prevent food from being spoiled. So you also put up a covering for that purpose. So kasha dadi. So how's it possible? Like one says you can make these temporary type tents, and one says you can't. Lo kasha, how Rabbi Eliezer, Harabanan. That's not a problem. One of these opinions is Rabbi Eliezer. Another one is the opinion of the Rabbanan. Nan, as we learned in the Mishnah, the Kaka Chalon. This is referring to window shutters. So literally it sounds like a window cork, because these were not like modern shutters, which are that are attached and and have hinges. Instead, they're just you literally just like stick it on and then you pull it off. So more like a cover than like a swinging shutter. And Rabbi Eliezer Omer Bezman Shekashur V'Talui Poka Kimbo. Rabbi Eliezer says as long as there's a string connecting it and it's hanging down, then means you're allowed to use it. But if it's not, connected by a rope or something else, you can't close the shutter. But Rachamim say, either way, there's no problem filling of shutting the window with the shutter, because it's only you're constructing a temporary wall, and therefore it would be mutar, similar to the case we had by the sukkah. But is this really so? What about what Rabbi Baruch said in Rabbi Yochanan? Kol modim she'ein osin ohel arab et chiyuv b'yom tov. But didn't Rabbi Baruch said in Rabbi Yochanan that everybody agrees that you can't make a temporary tent on, from the outset on Yom Tov? In Tzarech Lamar l'Shabbat in Kal V'chomer, you don't need to say so for Shabbos. Lo nechlaku elo lahosif. No, they didn't argue with. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't argue with Chachamim, rather he's adding. Rabbi Eliezer, although his statement is meant to be said in addition to Rabbi Eliezer Chachamim. So Rabbi Eliezer Omer ein mosif b'Yom Tov ein tzarech lomar b'Shabbat, because Rabbi Eliezer says you can't add on Yom Tov and Kal V'chomer on Shabbos. Chachamim Omer ein mosif b'Shabbat ein tzarech lomar b'Yom Tov. And Chachamim say the opposite. Of course, you're allowed to do this. You're allowed to use these type of shutters on Shabbos. So then Kal V'chomer, it's allowed to be used on Yom Tov too. Ela kasha. No, so it's not a problem. Hak Rabbi Meir, Hak Rabbi Yehuda. One falls like Rabbi Meir, and one falls Rabbi Yehuda. Tanya, as we learned in a Beit. If you used so the issue isn't really arguing about what we thought it was about something else, is that the Beit is talking about kids using an animal as a wall for sikkos. Rabbi Meir pasel, Rabbi Yehuda machshir. Rabbi Meir says that's kasher. Rabbi Yehuda says Rabbi Meir says no good. Rabbi Yehuda says it's kasher, because so Rabbi Meir says it's no good because animals might move, which would then mean that you no longer have your sukkah. But Rabbi Yehuda says as long as you currently have a wall, that's fine. So Meir tekapasil hatam amala mechitzi. Rabbi Meir says no good. It means that this animal is encountered being mechitza. Achashari to love midi kavid. So Rabbi Meir says that the wall doesn't work here, but the rest of sukkah. It's because you can't use a human being as mechitza. So here, so then what's the difference between the case of the sukkah versus the case on Shabbos? Hakashari delav bidekavid, because on the case of on Shabbos, you're not really making a wall because you didn't actually do anything. Like let's say the case we're referring to with the shutters is that you didn't actually construct anything anew. It's no temporary thing, so therefore that's why it would be allowed. But Rabbi Yehuda, who says that the animal counts as a wall for sukkah, so therefore he would say that means that it creates a full wall. Therefore, you should be forbidden from making that type of partition on that type of wall on Shabbos. But as far as this really so, does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that animals are full walls for everything, and that Rabbi Yehuda is not? I understand you're going to say that Rabbi Meir says no good because of the animal, but because animals are much harder to control and they might suddenly try to walk off. But who's to say that that a human will walk off, or that how about utensils? Like they can't move on their own. Like they're not living beings. So what's the issue? But two are merely demand, even more so. We're talking about Rabbi Meir's opinion. So regarding to creation of these temporary structures. He's according to whose opinion is he? It's according to Rabbi Eliezer, according to Chachamim. If he's according to Rabbi Eliezer, right, who was Rabbi Meir's teacher, then there's a problem because Rabbi Eliezer made it prohibited even for the case of the window shutter, which is only temporary. So how could he say that you're okay now for making the sukkah wall with the animal? So rather, it must be according to the opinion of the Chachamim. And maybe when the Rabbanan say you're allowed to add so they didn't say that you're allowed to make it from scratch. They're saying that you currently have an existing structure and you're currently extending it a little bit by your fixing by closing up a window. But did you have a wall there before? Yes, just I can just close the window. It's not the same thing as as putting up a new wall. So Elaha v'Haraban. Rather, actually, both being according to the opinion of the Chachamim. So actually, let's rephrase the case of using the case of using the utensils and animals and everything for walls. There really is no problem. It's all according to the Chachamim's opinion. Rather, we're talking about the third wall versus the fourth wall. The third wall for a sukkah, you're actually creating something, right? It goes from being not a sukkah to being a sukkah. Whereas for the fourth wall, you're doing extensions, therefore it would be permitted, as opposed to when you're doing the third wall where it would be prohibited. So Dekanami, you can even infer this from the right as well. Diktani, as it says in the right side, Nafal Dofna, Shomina. It says its wall fell, and which means that this wall was a important wall, not simply a wall that was just not to say that you had as happens more frequently due to Corona and COVID-19, that you start partitioning out spaces between tables, but that's not like that's not a full wall. It's just more of a it's not a permanent wall. It's a temporary one to begin with, and like the structure is not going to collapse because your movable plastic wall that's not load bearing and doesn't do anything, and you just wheeled in 3 seconds ago. So that type of wall we're not worried about. What we're really worried about is if it was an actual wall of your building fell down. Now you're going to try and fix it back up with one of these things. That's what's the problem, not simply when it's a temporary type wall. So right, so there's that. So now we solved that issue in regards to how it works with regards to the utensils. So now turning on to Mem Daled and Mem Bet. So then why in one case are you allowed the person to make the wall in the case of sukkah, but you can't use them for the case of Eruvin? Like, well, why is that the case? Like, why is the human good in one case, not the other one? Which is, again, this is the original thing we were asking about. Are you allowed to make a human wall? So Adam no kasha. No, it's not an issue. So the question is when you're allowed to use a human being as a wall, is you're only allowed to do so unknowingly, but if knowingly, then it's a problem. So to relate that to our case, so that if you happen to people happen to like you said, okay, everybody let's go out for a nice walk, and then you happen to notice that, oh look, Nechemi happens to be here, and then you say, hey, everybody surrounds me saying, hey, how you doing? Then Nechemi can quickly make a break for the slope. But you couldn't, ideally tell everybody, okay, everybody, you stand here, you stand here, you stand here, you stand here, so the Nechemi can come back into the slum. That'll be a problem. So the Rabbi Nechemi bar the Rabbi Chan lied. Right? So Rabbi Nechemi's case. So didn't he tell him to do it intentionally? Shalom edad hava. No. They were simply recommending. So when we had the whole discussion what was going on there with Rabbi Nechemiah, it was actually so the Tanaim were debating how to do it, and they weren't going to tell anybody how to. What was like they're going to try and do the trick of like let's all go say hi to Rabbi Nechemia and not actually tell them what's going on. That way Rabbi Nechemia can come back in. So that's how you would solve that issue. By again, it's weird to do the type of harama, but I guess that's what we have to do. So Rav Chisda Miel Datava. Rav Chisda seemingly did so knowingly. Right, when he gave the recommendation. Rav Chisda Shalom and Minyan Hava. No, because that's fine, because Rav Chisda may have been arranging things, but he wasn't actually one of the people who were part of the group that made the human wall. So since he wasn't part of making the human wall, therefore it's permitted. Okay, so now we have another case involving human walls. So Hanahu b'nei Genana da'ilu Maya b'mechitza shal b'nei Adam. So there were members of a wedding party who asked everybody who was present. So basically, somebody share bracha happening here, and then they ran out of water, and they wanted to get water from somewhere else. So they decided to try and say, okay, everybody, we're out of drinks, so let's all make walls, and that way we can bring the drinks from next door. Well, there's no Eruv. So and then Nagdinhu Shmuel. Shmuel says then Shmuel had said they should all be flogged for doing such a public violation of Shabbos. So Amar Ima Amru Shalom Da'at Yomru Da'at. So he says if the Chachamim say that it works, that when we say that the Chachamim permit if the wall happened to have been created, so that's not saying that Chachil you do that. It means saying that they don't mean that you should be doing this. I mean that if it happened to happen, you can rely on it. Not that you should be ideally setting out to do such a thing. So that was why he flogged them. Okay. So now we're gonna have another case. So Hinao Ziki Dahava Shadyan Beriskata Mukusa. So there were these flasks that were lying in the market of Mechos on Shabbos, and they couldn't be moved. And then when Rava came by with, after Shir, after he gave his lecture at his house, he had a lot of people crowding around him. So basically what happened is, so this appears to be that it's basically by Rava's front door. And so basically he'd left some some barrels of wine that, outside. And then, he had some servants, who noticed that, who seemingly are pretty smart, and they noticed that, like, oh no, we left it outside. What are we gonna do? And they saw when Rav was coming with everybody for a lot of people, maybe he was giving a shear, maybe he was just invited a lot of people over for lunch, whichever it was. And then his attendants, utilized the people and snuck in the extra barrels. So, and then the next week, the same thing happened. The next job is the attendants try to do the same thing. And then Rava said, don't do that to have a like Kiladat, because then it basically means that that his attendants knew what was going to happen, and also the people would start noticing as well. So therefore, it would be considered to be Ladat, as in done intentionally, and therefore he prohibited it. So therefore, that shows us that you're allowed to. That human traditions work as walls, but they should not be used ideally. So back to the sukkah case. So let's say for some, let's say somehow you have a for you made a sukkah in your backyard. This is not really so relevant if you're living in Canada, because you would never think of only having a wall, only having two good walls and then having one flimsy wall, because the weather will get in and you'll have a miserable time on sukkahs. But assuming you're in a warmer climate, let's say Israel. Then oftentimes people do have that. Let's say they have the corner of their house and they put something very flimsy for the third wall. So let's say, and then it happens to have fallen over on Shabbos. So right, so instead you could get so if you wanted to use it, so you shouldn't tell the person, by the way, stand here. You're being used as my mechita, so that way I can eat my sukkah. But instead, you start talking to them. You put their chair right there, and that way they happen to be used as the wall. And then you can and then while they're standing there, you can quickly eat, and then then no one's the wiser. Just have to make sure that you eat quickly before he happens to move, and then again you'll be left with 2 walls instead of 3.
Rabbi, sorry, maybe I missed this, but even b'diavad, when is it? Isn't that bonnet? Like, how are you able to? I mean, it's not really building, but if you're creating a wall, where's the cooler for that?
The cool is because you're building with a person, it's not considered to be. It's not real building. Is the answer. Is that because it's not this, because a person, if you moved a person or moved an item to a location, it's not considered to be you've built anything. As in, if I walk from here to there, right? So it's in like, I haven't done any unless I violated Zichron or doing Mitzvah in the process. But as far as construction wise goes, I simply walked. So yes, now there's a human wall there, but it's not a real wall because it's not supposed. It can't stay there forever. It'll move the second that somebody decides that they're bored.
Right, but before you had a wall, now you have a wall. I mean, it's not. You're right. It's not construction. It's a strange concept. It's a very strange concept.
Correct, which is why it's a very big situation, which you would never recommend somebody to do. You should not, because we generally don't like using humans as walls, especially not halacha, and also because it'd be a little cruel. As in, like, if you made a human wall sukkah, that just seems a little mean. So don't recommend against doing so. We're talking about a very b'diavad case that in theory it could work. You should definitely not do this because, but excellent question. Yeah. So, okay. So now we're gonna have one last case along this day before we go to the what's Mishnah. So Levi Ailu Le Tivna Zira Aspasta Rav Shimi Barchia Maya. So now we say that for Levi he had he pulled a similar trick to what happened with Rava with regards to people who were having standing around, and then he snuck in some straw. Ziri did a similar thing with Aspasta, which is a type of fodder. And Rav Shimi Barchia did the same trick with water. But again, you can do it. This is one of those tricks you could do once, but you can't do it frequently, or it'll lead to problems. Because once people are aware of it, it no longer works, which would make everything that you were trying to do pointless. Okay, so now we're starting a new Mishnah. So now we're talking about the case of somebody having left different cases of left Zichron, where it's supposed to before where you get stuck. Now we're talking about cases where you're not stuck. Okay, so Misha Yatsa Birshut Vamrulo Parnasa Maasa Yeshel Paim Amal Chol Roch. So a person left the Zichron in order to save somebody's life, or in order to testify by the new moon, as is mentioned, in terms of the new moon, so it's meant that and how the process goes, that's discussed in Mishnah and Rosh Hashanah. And as far as going to save people, so that's mentioned in Mar Shabbos as well as here, which we'll get to in tomorrow. So in those cases, if somebody told you while you're on the way, by the way, it's already taken care of, so you get 2,000 amot from wherever you are when you're told that it's already been resolved. And if you happen to have not yet left the Zichron of the original city, then he may return to his original location. And anybody who had gone out of there, who had left in order to save somebody's life, they are able to return to their original location. So again, we'll hopefully discuss some more halakha meanings of this as the Gemara discusses it. For now, let's go with the Gemara, and then we will hopefully see some things in regards to that. So, my im hayab tochat chom lo yatsa. What do we mean that if you were within the Zichron, it's as if you never left? So, amarabba hakikam. What does it mean to say? Im hayab tochat chom shalo kilu lo yatsa matoch Beit dami. So, so Rabbah says that if he haven't been within the tchum, it's as if he never left his house, and therefore his tchum isn't reset from where he had been told. In fact, but instead he still has his original tchum based on its center around his house. Shita, isn't it obvious? He didn't leave the tchum. Why would you say that his tchum would change? No. So you may have thought that since he had in mind that he's changing his location, he says, I'm not here for Shabbos anymore. I'm going to be where I need to be in order to save the person's life, or for the purposes of testifying about the new moon, so that we'll have the right month. So you may have thought that since he had in mind that he's leaving, that he lost his home as being his location for Shabbos. That's not the case. Rav Shimi bar Chia Amar Hachi Kamar Imayat Tchumin Shenatno Lo Chachamim Uvlaim Betoch Tchum Shalo Kilo Yatsa B'Tchumu. So Rav Shimi bar Chia actually has a different interpretation of this whole story. He says that it's actually based on it's actually based upon what's it called? It's based on that it's not. Sorry, that it's not that he's that he's still within the tchum, because that's super obvious. Rather, he's giving saying that when you redraw the 2,000 amo from where he's told, if that 2,000 circle, right, think Venn diagram, right, if the one circle then overlaps with the previous circle, then we're good, right? And then so not that you only 2,000. So I mean that's a much bigger kula. So what is the argument between Rabbah and Rav Shimi bar Chia? Right, Rabbah who said you only get 2,000 from where you are, versus Rav Shimi bar Chia who says you get 2,000 from where you are, and then if it happens to cross your original tchum, you can go back to your original tchum. So what are they arguing about? Mar Savar Havlat Tchum and Miltahi. Mar Savar Lav Miltahi. So one says that overlapping tchumin is a valid concept. The one says that that's not a valid concept, or in the more literal sense, one says that overlapping tchumin is a thing, and the other one says that it is not a thing, because milta is thing. So yeah, okay. So Amar Abaye l'Rabba va'at lo tispara davlat tchumin milti. So then Abaye turns around and says, wait, you don't believe that there's such a thing as overlapping tchums? That you ma ilu shabbat b'ma'ara uvtocha arbat alafim v'al hagag b'chom arbat alafim ama lo nimsa mahalecha kula v'chutz la alpay mama. So they're saying, what do you mean that you don't hold of overlapping limits? What if a person decided to spend Shabbat or Yom Tov in a cave, and then here we go. Let me share from Parashai, because this is we've got a good diagram here. Everybody sees that? Sees this? So the overlapping Havlat Tchum, right, is the right. So this is one person's tchum, this other person's tchum. Everybody sees that, and then we're talking about the case in the right. So that was that case, and now we're comparing it to the case where somebody is residing in a cave system. So that basically is 4,000 on the bottom. So therefore, if you had drawn your 2,000 amma with you at the center, right? So therefore, it would just get you basically to the ends, and above, by the entrances to it, is actually. I think we're reviewing this from let's review this from above, or if not, this is a really different weird structure for a cave to have, right? So let's pretend it's carved out into a cliff face, and now we're as if pretend we slide stuff on the top of it. So so this is a nice little cave he has. He's got some entrances on each side. So wouldn't we say that he gets 2,000 amma from each side of each entrance to the cave? So. Right, so don't you say that you get the whole area that you're residing, i.e. the cave? You get the 4,000, you get 2,000 amma around you there, and then you also get from the entrances, you get 2,000 amma. So So Amrlay, v'lo shavi leid bein hachad shavat bavir mechitza b'od yom. And v'lo shavat bavir mechitza b'od yom. So the rabbi turns around to Beit and says, "What do you mean? Are you saying that you should distinguish between a case where you had been in the petitions before Shabbos versus when you're not? So in the case where you're deciding to spend Shabbos in a cave, the reason why you get 2,000 amot outside the partitions is because outside all the walls is because you're residing there. So it's as if they're the walls of your house. So that's why that works. It has nothing to do with what you're saying. That it has nothing to do with the question of Havlat Chumen. It's a question of the fact that you have the walls already. So the Heichad lo Shabbat lo. Wait, so the Maya says, are you saying that Havlat Chumen doesn't apply with where there is no such where you didn't intentionally make a residence there? So you're saying that it only applies. So therefore, it only apply that it's on. Okay, so I think Okay, so I'll leave this part off for now, so we can actually do some review. And also, I think tomorrow I might also be a couple minutes late. Hopefully not. Hopefully, I'll have worked out my directional sense a little bit better. But if I am, I apologize. I apologize in advance. Also, hopefully, give at some point. I'll discuss a little bit about how bike riding relates to Chumen. So, but instead, let's just so let me go back to to sum up using pictures, since we're finally back in the we're back in the business with pictures, so we may as well enjoy it. So we're talking about the human wall trick. So here's a right. So this is so see where that would be over here, right? We've got people basically surrounding. This would be the person, the little dot, and then you're trying to see do you get all the way there or not. Then we're discussing. So we're trying to figure out would that work or not. So we discussed the case of making walls using so it's a third wall for a tent using by putting a blanket over a bed frame. We discussed using humans for it, using items for it. We also discussed the question of when you putting in shutters and whether or not that's allowed or not, and how the machloket between Chachamim and Rabbi Eliezer. We discussed the case of using the animal as a wall, such as in this wonderful case. Right, and the question is, are we worried about the animal moving or not? We also discussed the case of the trying to sneak in the containers of fluid. I think so. It appears the Korper Shchai he went with the wine containers are actually made out of a whole piece of animal hide, and then they just bottle, and then you tie up the corners of the. Basically, if you skinned it whole, then you usually tie up the corners, then you have a very convenient and very very good and waterproof container. So again, the question is whether. So the question is, are we allowed to rely on this human wall that we have here, right? So basically, this is currently Shtarabim, and the house is, let's say, it would be over here. So now you want to bring it from the from in front of where people are inside. We said you're only allowed to use that trick in the case it's only allowed to use that trick bidi. Aved, meaning like an shalomida, like you shouldn't ideally do that trick, and you can only do it when people aren't aware of it. But once people start being aware of it, it's a problem, which is why Rava didn't say anything when he noticed his attendance doing it the first time. The second time he said you shouldn't do that. As far as whether or not this is an accurate representation of how people dressed in the 3rd century and 4th century and 5th century, I will not comment, except to say that probably not. And yeah, for more on how they used to dress for that, please see back to where Shabbos Ishiot said, right, for what women go out in as well as what men would go out on Shabbos. See what the dress used to be in the time of the Gemara and the Mishnah. Anyways, then we discussed the question of overlapping tchumen. Does that mean that if you have a tchum, you get 2,000 amos? So the question is, how does that work? So right, so like if you'd gone out to save somebody or you'd gone out to testify this month, you said you get 2,000 amos from where that winds up being. Then we had a debate as to whether or not it's when we say that if you have to be close enough to where you started, you don't have to leave. So were we saying that you have the 2,000 amot from the just only if you're within the original 2,000 amot, or that's one opinion. The other opinion is that as long as you overlap tchum, as long as your new tchum that you get overlaps the original tchum that you then can return home. And then we discussed trying to compare that to the case of where you had been at in a cave, and we said that you can't compare that you can't compare the case of a cave and the tchum that relates to the cave, because the case of the cave is a case where we have existing walls that you decided to rest in before Shabbos, but but in our case there are no walls being involved. It's just a question of tchum, and we had left the question of tchum unresolved, and we'll hopefully return to that tomorrow as we continue on with Daf Mem Hey.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
The sugya about standing person in the opening is part of what I was telling you about Eruvin and Tshuva. It's Omed Baparetz. It goes back to the pasuk in Yecheskel. I need to do this drasha for you. I don't know if you have time. When you have time.
We can give it to, let me stand there,